And I know there are a couple people who flew in late last night, so I'll reintroduce myself. I'm John Kania, Managing Director at FSG, one of the two partners facilitating, along with Aspen Forum for Community Solutions, one of the two partners facilitating the Collective Impact Forum. So, my colleague Faye Hanley-Brown mentioned yesterday that, as the Collective Impact Forum sort of tries to sense, if you will, what's going on in the field, there are a couple of key topics that have risen to the surface that we're really trying to address in greater depth in a variety of different ways. Community engagement, leadership, and equity. And for tomorrow's plenary, we have Angela Glover-Blackwell from PolicyLink coming in to speak about equity. And in fact, we'll have 500 total people here between a variety of different tracks that are coming together to hear Angela speak about that really, really critical topic. But we're going to wade in this morning into the topic of leadership. And the process for our discussion over the next hour and a half is I'm going to lay out some of our perspectives on how we're seeing effective leadership in collaborative efforts in general and specifically in collective impact. I'll invite up to the stage Paul Schmitz and Stacy Holland, two really great leaders in the sector, to have a conversation about leadership and leadership in collective impact. And then we'll ask all of you to consider your own perspectives of what makes for effective practice in collective impact. What we thought we'd do, just to sort of warm up the bones to start things out, is to start by asking all of you to reflect on these two questions. Think about the most high-functioning team that you've been a part of, and what qualities of leadership fostered your positive results. So I'm going to ask all of you to actually think about that for 2 minutes in silence. Well, I love silence. I'm a silence junkie. So maybe we'll start with a little bit of silence and reflection on this question. And after about 2 minutes or so, I'll tell you time's up, and then maybe we can have a little bit of a table conversation just to warm things up this morning. So think about this question. Thanks. Yeah, right? This is a topic that animates you. This is a topic that is so critical to the work of collective impact. When we first published the article around collective impact 4 years ago, it sort of put these 5 conditions out there. It's interesting in that they seem to have stood the test of time. They've been resilient. They've been an effective way for many who've been doing this work for decades, well before we did, to really describe what it is that leads to positive and consistent progress at scale. And certainly, many initiatives that have actually put in place these 5 conditions are not necessarily succeeding, making positive and consistent progress at scale. And there are a variety of reasons for that. It could be the difficulty of bringing together and trying to collaborate in a community where collaboration just has never worked. It could be the competition and mistrust exists among particular funders or funders and grantees. It could be a struggle around agreeing on shared metrics. It could be the perennial obstacle of local politics. But I think what many would agree at this point is that in addition to putting in place the 5 conditions, leadership really does make a difference in achieving positive and consistent progress at scale. And from our standpoint, we're seeing at this point in the movement really 2 types of progress in collective impact. The first I would call maybe level 1 progress, and that's incremental progress. It is amazing to me, and I'm guessing for many of you in this room that are doing this work, it is amazing what happens when you get a full set of stakeholders around the table. If we can get the system in the room, if you will, if we can include everybody who sees a particular issue, all the eyeballs in the room, it's amazing what happens when you get them in the room because they've never talked to each other before. And stuff happens. You know, I've seen this so many times at this point. It's just incredible, getting people together in a room. And I'll give you just a very quick example. I think Betsy Dabowski from Staten Island Foundation is here. Where's Betsy? Betsy. So Betsy is a leading funder for an initiative on Staten Island called Tackling Youth Substance Abuse. And it's a teen substance abuse prevention initiative that began about 3 years ago. And it was actually just written up in the New Yorker. And Tackling Youth Substance Abuse, the initiative was actually mentioned. And you know, one of the things that happened in this initiative, and this is just getting people around the table, is the head of the police and a senior executive at one of the mental health organizations were at a collective impact meeting. And you know, there's a huge, as a challenge, just as there is in many communities, around opioid abuse in Staten Island and heroin. And the police chief was lamenting to this senior mental health care provider, you know, the fact that often they just show up too late, and you know, the child, the youth, is actually gone. And the mental health care provider said, you know, there's this drug, naloxone, and it comes in this nose spray application, Narcan, that if you actually spray it into the nostrils, it'll actually reverse the effects of the drug. And the police said, you're kidding me. So we just need to have all our first responders actually have Narcan with them. And so they went ahead and they did that. And over the next couple of months, they saved dozens of lives. People who would be dead, youth who would be dead, just because people got together around the table. And that is, you know, that we talk about quick wins, that's a quick win, saving lives, right? Well, you know, as great as that is, you know, it still doesn't address the underlying causes, right, of sort of making progress against all the social norms and all the challenges of teen substance abuse. But I think a wonderful example of just what can happen when people get around the table. People connect more, and you start to see incremental progress happening. The second type of progress that we're seeing in collective impact efforts, and this is the area that really interests me, is what I'll call level 2 progress, or transformational. You know, it's not getting 2 or 3% better, or even 7 or 10% better. It's getting 25 to 50% improvement, or even 90% improvement. Can we do that? Now, the word transformation gets bandied about a lot these days. It's sort of like the word movement. Who doesn't want to be part of a movement? Or even collective impact, right? There are a lot of people using that terminology that really don't sort of get what underlies it. So what is transformation? Transformation is something changing into something else. That's more mature. That's more connected. That's less egocentric. That's the type of progress I'm interested in. And so we have to ask ourselves, what type of leadership produces transformational results? And I think, you know, Scott Cowan mentioned business, and often we go to the business sector when we think about leadership. You know, I had a conversation recently with a senior executive, actually the CEO of a retired CEO of a Fortune 500 company, a pharmaceutical executive, who, as many people in that sort of stage of life, decided the next stage of their life was really going to be about making a difference. And we had a great conversation, and this individual had just gotten involved with actually a national teen substance abuse initiative. He was really passionate about it. And he said, you know, John, I'm so excited to be able to put my business skills to good use. You know, I really know how to sort of work, you know, motivate an organization, and I know all about strategy, and we've got some great evidence-based practices about sort of how we prevent teen substance abuse. And we need to drive those evidence-based practices into community. We need to force communities to understand what's good for them. Yeah. How do you think that's going to work? So I haven't checked in with him lately, but you know, I wonder about that, right? I wonder about that. So when we think about the type of leadership that's going to produce transformative results, the type of transformation that we're all looking for in community, I think we have to ask whether or not that is the type of leadership that typically we focus on when we talk about sort of organizational leadership. I think a different point of view might be that achieving transformational change, and in particular in collective impact, is about catalyzing collective leadership in others. And this is a topic that Peter Senge and Hal Hamilton and I wrote about recently in an article that was in Stanford Social Innovation Review. And we talked about catalyzing collective leadership in others as system leadership. Not organizational leadership, but system leadership. And as we look across the effective leaders that are out there doing this really difficult work of collective impact, they come with all sorts of personality styles and all sorts of sort of ways of sort of engaging people, different skill sets to a certain extent. But there's one thing that they all have in common. They are relentlessly dedicated to the health of the whole instead of the parts, or instead of their part. And as they're relentlessly dedicated to the health of the whole, they catalyze other leaders to be focused on the health of the whole. And how do you do that? What skills are actually involved in making that happen? Well, Peter, Hal, and I focused on three. And there may be others, but here are the three that we talked about in our research. The first is helping people understand the greater system and the complexity of which they're a part. Helping people understand the connections, the interconnections, the relationships between all the various different dimensions. Helping people understand the dysfunctions and the functional patterns. And helping people think about how we transform the dysfunctions. The more I do this work, the more I see that a critical role in helping people see the systems is helping us all see our blind spots. We all have blind spots. It's a critical role, helping people see the system. The second is fostering a deeper, different type of dialogue that leads to greater clarity. Okay, the social sector, I think, is often referred to as a very deliberative sector. There's a lot of deliberation that goes on. Why is that? Well, what is so critical here, and we can't shortchange this step, is this is about collectively making meaning. It's about creating shared meaning. So when we're bringing a diverse set of stakeholders together, and we're looking at the data, and we're disaggregating the data, we have to create shared meaning in the data. This is so critical. This is what's not happening in Congress between Republicans and Democrats. When we think about what's happening in communities, between government authorities and the community themselves, we need to come together and facilitate a process for shared meaning. And coming out of that, we need to stop thinking about fixing the problem, and we have to co-create a future. This is about creating out of shared meaning, we create shared pictures of the future. And the outcome we're seeking here is not compliance, but commitment and enrollment. Not compliance, but commitment and enrollment. Now, when you unpack these three tasks, which on the surface seem rather simple, they seem fairly enormous when we're thinking about communities dealing with hundreds of organizations and tens of thousands of individuals. How can we do this? Well, the reality is that, and this is the reality of social change, is that we have yet to come up with an effective collective impact effort that was led by one system leader. The reality is that in any effective collective impact effort, you need multiple system leaders who have these capacities and capabilities. Now, as I look out across this crowd, I see, because I know many of you, we have effective system leaders here. But we often get the question, well, what does a system leader look like? So I want to introduce you to one, and this is an individual that we actually profiled in the article that we wrote, Molly Baldwin. Some of you from the East Coast may have heard of Molly. Molly is the CEO of an organization called ROCA. They focus on working with high-risk young men and young mothers specifically, and where they've really made terrific progress is working on this issue of recidivism. And they work in relentless outreach with young individuals and help provide them with employment skills and education. And they've had an extraordinary success. And in fact, they are the recipient of the first social impact bond in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts based on the outcomes that they are actually achieving. Now, what's interesting is that Molly has not only catalyzed collective leadership, or catalyzed, her own sort of leadership, but she's been effective at catalyzing others in the community. Here's Tom Ash. Tom is the town manager. Here's Brian Keyes. Brian is the police chief. And I'm going to show you a 6-minute video now, and Molly will describe a bit of sort of her transformation as she worked in community. You'll also hear from Tom, and you'll also hear from Brian, and how they've experienced this as well. Let's take a look.
ROCA is an intervention model for very high-risk young men and young mothers in Massachusetts, and we build long-term relationships with young people and try to help them make the changes they need to succeed in their life. It's a 4-year program. It's 2-year intensive support, 2-year less intensive. Our outreach is relentless. That's kind of what we're known for, relentless outreach. We're just sort of pain in the you-know-what and follow people around and bang on the door and find your friends. We stay in relationships and use our relationships with you as a vehicle for change. Then, we really essentially have built a Get Your Life Together school based on life skills and education and transitional employment.
Set the fence for 5 inches, all right?
We were sort of a classic street outreach, youth worker, pain in the butt, in your face, I'm right, you're wrong, fight the system, love the kids, mad at the police, mad at the schools, self-righteous kind of classic individual I was in organization. And we had the occasion to learn something very different through a training we did on peacemaking circles, restorative justice methodology, where it became completely clear that the way in which we were thinking about relationships with other people was wrong. In our heart of hearts, we wanted all young people to feel like they belonged. That we didn't want a world where some group of young people felt like they didn't belong. And yet there we were kind of recreating the not belonging.
When I first met ROCA, I was taken back by ROCA and their approach. ROCA was coming into my city to tell me, who had been involved in civic affairs all my life, what I was doing wrong and how I was missing out on so many issues. Fortunately, ROCA stayed with me as I began to be more open about what I was hearing and willing to listen to more, and helped me understand that my preconceived notions about what we were doing right weren't always right, and that things had to change for the better.
And so, when I think about system leadership, it's really about how we engage individually and collectively with whatever system or systems that we need to be working in and with. It's about figuring out how to work together so that collectively, whether it's as ROCA as a system, or in partnership with police or the criminal justice system, or in partnership with the systems at play in any city, whether it's Chelsea or the city of Boston, how we're engaging in that bigger system and kind of creating an environment where more change for people to move forward can happen.
If we, like we once were years ago, we're a closed organization, a closed entity, and we felt like we could arrest our way out of any situation, obviously we know that that's ridiculous, we can't do it, but there was a time when that's exactly how we proceeded.
In the past 4 years, we've really worked very differently with the police department, where we really engaged on a higher level. We were cross-training, sharing data, and the crime rate for young people in our age group has gone down.
Crime is now 36% over the last 4 years. I tie that directly to ROCA. Within the area of crime, violent crime is now 44% during the same period of time. I tie that directly to what ROCA is doing.
I don't think anything's magic, but I do think that as people, either individually or collectively, whether it's through governance, whether it's through coalitions, whether it's through organizations, police departments, if we can be truthful about the problems we are facing and work together to find ways to address them. That's sort of the only way out of it. Like, there's no way to it, as I say, other than through it.
What we see here is a community that is safer, a community that is more productive, a community that is embracing people from all walks of life. We've opened up to the idea that not everybody is at the same place, not everybody is ready to contribute, but we've also opened up to the idea that not everybody is bad, and that there is possibility of good in everybody. And if we provide a vehicle to help those people find the goodness in them, that they will succeed and be contributing members of our community.
You know, we actually wrote this article and featured Molly well over a year ago. We produced this video in the middle of this past year. But really poignant when we think about what's going on in communities across the country right now. And it's sort of a different outcome, right? A transformational outcome when you look at the results that are occurring there. So there's a lot of interesting points that I could make about what we just saw. I want to focus on just one that I think is perhaps the most important thing that we can take away from this. If we want to transform systems, transforming systems is ultimately about transforming the relationships of people who shaped the systems. It's about transforming the relationships of people who shape the systems. And here's the ironic thing, that this sort of transformation cannot occur through an exclusive focus on how others need to change what they do. That, to me, is part of the remarkable part of what you just saw in this video, the transformation that Molly needed to go through. From saying the problem's out there to I need to focus on what I own with the problem. And you saw it also with Jay Ash and with Brian Keyes. That same sort of transformation, I don't know if it occurred, but I got to imagine that Molly's transformation did in fact influence and help with their transformation. Otto Scharmer talks about when you want to work on transforming systems, you need to focus on these three things. An open mind, to be able to release your assumptions. An open heart to truly listen to each other. And an open will to let go of your pre-existing assumptions and goals and to let's see what's actually emerging. Now, this doesn't happen by accident. This happens through practice. In fact, I think there's probably no other way, as Molly said, there's no other way through it, to it but through it. I think for all of us, we have to practice some level of stillness and some level of mindfulness. There is so much that's coming at us in this work, and the most effective backbone leader is the one that they say, she listens to everybody, but she knows which direction to follow. And that is core to this work. Perhaps one of the most inspirational examples of this is Nelson Mandela, who in 1964 took up arms to fight against the fact that 67 peaceful protesters had been killed, and he was sent to prison vowing that he would fight white domination to his death. 27 years later, he emerged from prison. You know, in essence, a forced silence and stillness that none of us would want to go through. But he emerged a wise and just ruler. And in my opinion, he produced one of the most, if not the most, transformational outcomes that this world has ever seen in truth and reconciliation. So we need to know, we need to have faith that this sort of leadership can produce transformational results. It can produce transformational results. We've seen it, and we need to focus on it. So, with that, we're going to transition to the next. This is the awkward transition part of the program, where I'm going to invite Paul Schmitz and Stacy Holland up here, and we're going to have a little bit of conversation about leadership, and then we'll turn the conversation back to you. Thank you.